Hey guys, tonight we sail across the vast Pacific under a dome of twinkling stars with no map, no compass, just you, a creaky wooden canoe, and a flock of seabirds skimming the waves. You're a Polynesian Voyager, maybe 800 years ago, bobbing on the ocean's endless blue, trusting nature's whispers to find land that's just a rumor on the horizon. The air smells of salt and wet rope, and the hull groans as waves slap its sides. You're out here, no GPS, no backup, and, let's be real, you probably wouldn't survive a week without Wi-Fi, let alone this. But these navigators, they thrived. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're out here, sprawled on a woven mat in the canoe's belly, staring at a sky so clear it feels like you could scoop up the stars. Polynesian Voyagers from about 1000 BCE to 1300 CE crossed thousands of miles of open ocean, colonizing islands from Hawaii to New Zealand without a single written chart. Mainstream history marvels at this. They used a system called wayfinding, reading stars, winds, and waves like a living map. You tilt your head back, and there's the Southern Cross, winking low, pointing you toward some speck of land you've never seen. It's not just pretty, it's your GPS. These folks, from societies like the Tongans and Samoans, memorized star paths, passing them down through chance. No paper, no problem. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some navigators claimed they could feel islands before seeing them, like a sixth sense for land's pull. Historians still argue whether this was intuition or just hyper-tuned observation. You try it now, closing your eyes, feeling the canoe's sway. Nah, all you feel is a bit seasick. The stars aren't just lights, they're stories. You're told about Hokulea, not the modern canoe, but the star, Arcturus to us, rising over Hawaii. It's a beacon for voyagers, and you're learning its arc tonight. You squint at the horizon, where the sea meets the sky in a fuzzy line. The Polynesians didn't just guess. They knew which stars rose and set over specific islands. You're trying to keep up, but your brain's already begging for a nap. Funny thing, wayfinders didn't sleep much either. They'd stay awake, tracking constellations like obsessive astronomers. You chuckle, imagining one muttering, "Missed Orion again, rookie mistake." The canoe rocks gently, and you're lulled by the rhythm. The air's cooling now, a breeze brushing your face like a soft hand. You're not just sailing, you're learning to trust the sky, like your life depends on it. Because it does. You're starting to get why stars beat maps. Paper gets soggy, stars don't. You're picturing a soggy map now, aren't you? Useless in this spray. Polynesians didn't need them because they carried the heavens in their heads. You're memorizing a star path now. Follow Vega as it climbs, then watch it dip toward Rapa Nui. It's like a cosmic treasure hunt, but instead of gold, you get a beach. Worth it. The canoe's timbers creak, and you notice the crew's quiet confidence. They're not panicking, even 500 miles from land. You, though? You're double-checking for sharks. Relax, the water's calm, and the stars are loud tonight. You're sinking into the mat, letting the ocean's pulse carry you. The Milky Way's a glowing ribbon above, and you're starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, you could find an island too. Or at least dream about one. You're still bobbing in that double-hulled canoe, the Pacific stretching endless around you, and now you're noticing the birds. Frigate birds, terns and boobies, swooping low over the waves. Their wings catch the dawnlight, flashing like signals, and you're learning why Polynesian voyagers trusted these feathered guides over any map. The air's thick with salt, and the canoe's gentle sway feels like a lullaby, but you're wide awake, watching a noddy tern dart towards some invisible shore. These birds aren't just pretty, they're your lifeline. Mainstream history confirms Polynesians used seabirds as navigation tools, spotting land by their flight patterns. Birds like terns fly out to sea at dawn and back to land by dusk. You're trying to keep up, tracking a booby's path, but it's tricky. Here's the quirky bit. Some navigators swore certain birds carried messages from ancestors, like divine post-it notes. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or a poetic way to describe sharp observation. You squint at a frigate bird's red throat pouch, puffed up like a balloon, and wonder if it's signalling land or just showing off. The crew's pointing now, murmuring about a shearwater veering west. You're told it's heading to a roost, maybe an atoll 50 miles off. You're skeptical. How's a bird better than a GPS? But then you notice the pattern. Birds fly straighter as land nears, less aimless flapping. You're starting to get it, lying back on the woven mat, the canoe creaking like an old rocking chair. The sky's fading to pink, and you're imagining a navigator chuckling, "Trust the turn, not your gut." The ocean's whispers mix with the birds' cries, and you're sinking deeper into the rhythm. You spot a petrel skimming low, and the crew nods. Land's close. Your heart skips, but you're too cozy to panic. The birds are your map now, and you're learning to read their wings like a book. You're picturing yourself as a wayfinder's apprentice, squinting at a flock of boobies, hoping you don't misread their flight and end up in the middle of nowhere. The crew's calm, sipping coconut water, while you're mentally checking for life vests. Spoiler, there aren't any. You laugh quietly, imagining a Polynesian sailor rolling their eyes at your modern paranoia. The birds keep flying, and you're noticing their rhythm. Out at dawn, back by dusk, like clockwork. You're told about the golden plover, a bird that migrates thousands of miles, landing on tiny specks like Hawaii. You're impressed, but also jealous. Your last vacation involved missing a connecting flight. The canoe's hull hums as a wave nudges it, and you're lulled by the sound, your eyelids drooping. The birds are your guides, and you're starting to trust them, even if you're still half convinced you'd pick a soggy map over a squawking tern. The horizon's glowing now, and you're watching a frigate bird soar high, its pouch deflating as it dives. The crew says it's scouting land, and you're trying to believe them. You're not exactly Magellan, but you're getting the hang of this. The stars from last section, remember those? Are still above, but now the birds are stealing the show. You're lying back, the mat scratching your shoulders, and the ocean's pulse is slowing your breath. A tern cries, sharp and clear, and you're drifting, imagining islands just beyond the curve of the sea. You're not lost, not with these birds leading. The canoe rocks gently, and you're sinking into the story, the birds' wings blurring into dreams. Maybe you'll spot land soon, or maybe you'll just nap. Either way, you're safe. You're still swaying in that double-hulled canoe, the Pacific's gentle waves lapping at the hull. But now your hands are running over the smooth, curved wood beneath you. You're not just a passenger. You're helping build this vessel, learning why Polynesian voyagers crafted these canoes with such obsessive care. The air smells of fresh timber and sea spray, and you're surrounded by the rhythmic thwack of stone adzes shaping logs. Your arms ache from hauling planks, and you're wondering how anyone survived this without power tools. Mainstream history notes that Polynesian canoes, often 50 feet long, were engineering marvels, built for voyages across thousands of miles, using only wood, fibre lashings, and coral files. You're tying coconut fibre cords now, your fingers fumbling, and you're half laughing at your clumsy knots. Good luck sailing to Fiji with those. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some builders whispered chants to wake the canoe's spirit, believing it needed a soul to brave the ocean. Historians still argue whether this was ritual or a way to focus craftsmanship. You're not sure, but you're muttering a chant anyway, just in case. The canoe's taking shape, two hulls lashed together for stability, like a catamaran's great-grandparent. You're carving a plank from a koa tree, its grain swirling like the waves you'll soon ride. The crew's teaching you to balance strength and weight, too heavy, and you'll sink, too light, and storms will snap you like a twig. You're picturing a modern shipyard, all cranes and blueprints, and chuckling. These folks used stars and birds, not AutoCAD. The hull's polished now, gleaming under the sun, and you're impressed, even if your hands are blistered. You're learning to lash the outrigger, a smaller float for balance, and the crew's joking that your knots look like a toddler's shoelaces. You grin, imagining a Polynesian sailor muttering, "City kid, stick to land." The ocean's hum fills the air, and you're sinking into the work, the repetitive tying lulling you like a soft drumbeat. You're starting to get why the canoe's design matters. The double hulls keep you steady, even when waves try to flip you like a pancake. You're testing the sail now, woven from pandanus leaves, catching the breeze like a giant kite. It's not just a boat, it's a floating village, carrying families, food, even chickens. You're chuckling again, picturing a clucking hen on board, probably a better sailor than you. The mainstream fact hits hard. These canoes crossed oceans before Columbus was born, reaching places like Rapa Nui with pinpoint accuracy. You're smoothing a hull edge, the wood warm under your palms, and you're feeling the pride of building something that defies the sea. The quirky chants still echo, and you're wondering if the canoe really listens. Maybe it does. The sun's dipping, casting golden ripples, and you're lying back, the canoe's gentle rock pulling you toward sleep. You're not sailing yet, but you're ready. Or at least, you hope so. The beach around you is alive with builders, their laughter mixing with the crash of waves. You're hauling a final log, your shoulders screaming, but the canoe's almost done. You're thinking back to those stars and birds from earlier sections. Remember them? And how this vessel will carry you to follow them. The hulls gleam, lashed tight, and you're starting to trust this floating miracle. You're not a master builder, but you're learning, and the ocean's calling, the air's cooling, the sky softening to dusk, and you're sprawled on the sand, the canoe's shadow over you like a guardian. Your eyes are heavy, the rhythmic waves a lullaby, and you're drifting, dreaming of the voyages this canoe will take. Maybe you'll even survive them. You're no longer on the beach, but back in that double-hulled canoe, now gliding smoothly over the Pacific's gentle swells, the horizon a hazy line under a star-strewn sky. You're not sailing yet. You're training, sitting cross-legged beside a master wayfinder, a grizzled Polynesian navigator whose eyes seem to hold the entire cosmos. The air's cool, laced with salt, and the canoe's timbers creak like a soft metronome. You're learning to memorize star paths, the invisible highways Polynesians followed for centuries, and your brain's already pleading for a cheat sheet. Mainstream history praises Polynesian navigators for their mental maps, committing hundreds of stars, rising and setting points to memory, guiding them across oceans from 1000 BCE to 1300 CE. You're trying to keep up, repeating the path of Hokulea, Arcturus, until it sticks. Here's the quirky bit. Some trainees chewed special routes to stay awake during these marathon lessons, like ancient energy drinks. Historians still argue whether this was pharmacology or just placebo. You're chewing a root now, grimacing at its bitter tang, and wondering if it's helping or just making you grumpy. The master's pointing at the sky, his voice low and rhythmic, naming stars like old friends. You're tracking Vega, watching it climb, then dip toward an island you can't see, He's teaching you to pair stars with chants, each verse a map in itself. You're mumbling one now, tripping over words, and you chuckle, imagining the master sighing, "This kid's lost before we leave shore." The canoe rocks gently, and you're lulled by its sway, but you're fighting to focus. The mainstream fact sinks in. These navigators could pinpoint islands thousands of miles away, using only their minds and the heavens. You're awestruck, but also stressed. Your last attempt at directions got you lost in a mall. The master's patient, though, guiding your gaze to the Pleiades, a cluster glowing like a cosmic breadcrumb trail. You're starting to get it. Even if your chant sounds like a bad karaoke attempt, you're lying back now, the woven mat prickly against your skin, staring at a sky that feels alive. The master's telling you about star houses, mental grids dividing the sky into sections, each tied to an island's location. You're picturing a celestial spreadsheet, and you're half laughing at how modern that sounds. The quirky roots still in your mouth, and you're not sure if it's working or just making you thirsty. The ocean's hum mixes with the master's voice, and you're sinking deeper into the lesson. You're repeating the chant now, better this time, and the master nods, just barely. You're not a wayfinder yet, but you're trying, and the stars are starting to feel like allies. You're thinking back to those birds and the canoe's sturdy hull from earlier sections. Remember them? And how they all connect. The sky's a map, the canoe's your home, and the birds will back you up. You're drowsy now, the stars blurring, but you're holding onto the chant, letting it carry you toward dreams of distant shores. The master's voice fades, blending with the waves' soft slap against the hull. You're sprawled out, the canoe's rhythm slowing your breath, and you're imagining sailing under these same stars, chanting your way to land. You're not there yet, but you're learning, and the Pacific's vastness feels less scary with each verse. The air's cooler now, the night wrapping you like a blanket, and you're drifting, the stars winking above like they're cheering you on. You're not a navigator, but tonight you're close enough to dream about it. You're still rocking gently in that double-hulled canoe, the Pacific's waves whispering against the hull, but now you're squinting at the ocean itself, trying to read its secrets like a Polynesian wayfinder. The air's warm, heavy with salt, and the skies are fading purple as dawn creeps in. You're learning to decode the sea's subtle cues, swells, clouds, even the way light dances on water, because out here, nature's your only map. Mainstream history confirms Polynesians mastered this art, using wave patterns and cloud formations to find islands across thousands of miles from 1000 BCE to 1300 CE. You're watching a swell roll under the canoe, its rhythm steady but shifting, and you're told it's a road pointing to land. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some navigators claimed they could taste the ocean to sense nearby islands, like sipping a salty GPS. Historians still argue whether this was real or just heightened awareness of currents. You dip a finger in the water, taste it, and wince. Yep, just salt. No land yet. The master wayfinder's beside you, pointing at a low cloud, its edges glowing like a halo. He says it's hugging an island, trapping moisture from land you can't see. You're skeptical, picturing your weather app failing you on a hike, but you're trying to trust him. The canoe sways, and you're lulled by its rhythm, your hands gripping the hull. You're noticing swells now, long lazy ones from distant storms, crisscrossing with shorter waves from nearby land. It's like reading a book in Braille, and you're chuckling, imagining yourself bragging, "I navigated by ripples." The master's not laughing. He's pointing at a ripple pattern, saying it's a reef's echo. You're impressed, but also wondering if you'd rather just Google it. The ocean's hum is constant, soothing, and you're sinking into its pulse, your eyelids heavy. You're lying back now, the woven mat scratching your back, watching clouds drift like lazy sentinels. The mainstream fact hits you. Polynesians could read these signs so well. They colonized places like Hawaii and Rapa Nui without instruments. You're trying to spot a land cloud now, one that's stationary, not drifting like the others. You're not great at it. Your cloud looks like a bunny, not an island. You laugh softly, picturing a wayfinder muttering, "Focus, rookie," or "We're shark bait." The quirky taste test lingers in your mind, and you're tempted to try again, but the sea's too salty, and you're too cozy. The master's teaching you to feel the canoe's tilt, how it rides swells differently near land. You're getting it, slowly, and the ocean's starting to feel like a friend, not a void. Those stars and birds from earlier sections, remember them, are still guiding you. But now the waves are talking too. The canoe's rocking is slower now, the air cooling as night creeps back. You're sprawled out, the sea's rhythm syncing with your breath, and you're noticing a faint glow on the water, phosphorescence, tiny sparks of light. The master says it's stronger near land. Another clue. You're not sure if you believe him, but you're too drowsy to argue. The swells lift you gently, and you're imagining islands just beyond the horizon, waiting for you to find them. The ocean's a puzzle, and you're piecing it together, one wave at a time. Your eyes are closing, the master's voice fading into the sea's soft hum, and you're drifting, dreaming of currents carrying you to a shore you'll know by feel. You're still adrift in that double-hulled canoe, the Pacific's gentle waves rocking you like a cradle. But now the crew's gathered in a circle, their voices low as they share the myth of Maui, the trickster demigod whose tales are woven into Polynesian navigation. The air's warm, scented with salt and the faint sweetness of pandanus leaves, and the stars above glitter like scattered jewels. You're listening, sprawled on the woven mat as the story unfolds, tying the art of wayfinding to legends that feel as alive as the sea. Mainstream history notes that myths like Maui's, told across Polynesia from 1000 BCE to 1300 CE, weren't just stories. They encoded navigation knowledge, embedding star paths and ocean cues in epic tales. You're hearing how Maui lassoed the sun to slow it down, giving voyagers longer days to sail. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some storytellers claimed Maui taught birds to guide canoes, like he personally trained every turn. Historians still argue whether these myths were literal beliefs or mnemonic devices for navigators. You're chuckling, imagining Maui bribing a booby with fish to fly straight. The crew's storyteller paints a vivid scene. Maui, standing on a canoe much like yours, hauling stars into place with a magic fishhook. You're picturing it, the hook glinting under moonlight, and you're half convinced you'd fumble the hook and drop it overboard. The tale says Maui's tricks helped voyagers find islands by marking key stars, like Hokulea from earlier. Remember that star? You're trying to connect the dots, the myth's rhythm lulling you as the canoe sways. The mainstream fact sinks in. These stories were oral GPS, passed down through generations, ensuring navigators remembered critical routes. You're impressed, but also wondering if you'd forget the chant halfway to Tahiti. The crew's laughing now, joking that Maui would have fired you for dozing off during a story. You grin, sinking deeper into the mat, the sea's hum blending with their voices. You're lying back now, the canoe's gentle rock sinking with your breath, and the story shifting to Maui's voyage to raise islands from the sea. The teller says each island's birth was marked by a star, a cue for wayfinders. You're trying to memorize the stars in the tale, Vega, Sirius, but your eyes are heavy, and you're imagining Maui rolling his eyes at your sleepy effort. The quirky bird training bit sticks with you. You're picturing a tern squawking directions like a feathered Siri. The mainstream history's clear. Myths like these weren't just entertainment. They were survival tools, embedding navigation in every verse. You're awestruck, but also chuckling, thinking of modern sailors with GPS arguing over who gets the aux cord. The ocean's pulse is steady, and you're noticing the crew's calm, their faith in Maui's tales as strong as their trust in the waves from last section. The night's deepening, the air cooling, and you're sprawled out, the mat's weave pressing into your skin. The storyteller's voice is softer now, weaving Maui's final feat, stealing fire for humans, a gift for cold nights at sea. You're feeling the warmth of that fire in your imagination, the stars above mirroring its glow. Those birds, waves, and stars from earlier sections, remember them, are all part of this story, tying the canoe to the cosmos. You're not a wayfinder yet, but the myths making you believe you could be. The canoe rocks gently, the sea whispering, and you're drifting, the tail carrying you toward dreams of islands rising from the waves, guided by a trickster's light. You're still swaying in that double-hulled canoe, the Pacific's waves lulling you with their steady rhythm. But now your hands are gripping a smooth stone adze, its weight solid as you learn the tools that built these seafaring marvels. The air's thick with the scent of shaved wood and sea salt, and the canoe's timbers hum softly under your feet. You're not just sailing, you're crafting, surrounded by the clink of coral files and the scrape of stone on wood. Mainstream history marvels at Polynesian toolmaking, noting that from 1000 BCE to 1300 CE, they shaped canoes and gear using only stone, bone, and coral, with no metal in sight. You're trying to carve a paddle now. Your swing's clumsy, and you're chuckling, imagining a master craftsman muttering, "You're hacking like a drunk turtle." Here's the quirky tidbit. Some adzes were polished with shark skin, giving them a shine that supposedly pleased the sea gods. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual or just practical for smoother cuts. You're rubbing shark skin on your adze, hoping for divine approval, but mostly just scratching your palm. The crew's showing you how to shape a koa log, each stroke precise, like sculpting a wave. You're sweating, the sun high, and you're picturing a modern power drill with envy. Sorry, no Home Depot out here. The mainstream fact hits hard. These tools, simple as they seem, built canoes that crossed oceans, carrying entire communities to new islands. You're impressed, but also wincing as your adze slips, nearly nicking your foot. The crew laughs, joking that the sea gods don't like sloppy work. You're getting the hang of it, sort of, smoothing a plank until it gleams. The canoe's hull, from that earlier section, remember it, owes its strength to these tools. And you're feeling the weight of that legacy. The ocean's hum mixes with the scrape of stone, and you're sinking into the rhythm, your arms aching, but your mind calm. You're lying back now, the woven mat prickly against your skin, watching the crew polish an outrigger with coral files. The quirky sharkskin trick lingers in your mind, and you're wondering if the gods really care about shiny tools, or if it's just Polynesian flair. You're picturing a craftsman showing off his adze like it's a new iPhone, and you chuckle softly. The mainstream history's clear. These tools weren't just practical. They were cultural treasures, passed down like heirlooms. You're trying to carve a notch now, your hands steadier, but you're still no artisan. The crew's patient, guiding your grip, and you're starting to respect the stone in your hand. Those stars, birds, and waves from earlier sections, remember them, all depend on this canoe, and these tools made it possible. The sun's dipping, casting golden light on the hull, and you're sprawled out, the sea's pulse slowing your breath. The crafting's slowing now, the air cooling as dusk settles in. You're noticing the tools wear, their edges smoothed by years of use. Each scratch a story of voyages past. You're not a craftsman, but you're learning, and the canoe feels alive under you, its wood warm from the day's work. The ocean's whispers blend with the crew's quiet chatter, and you're drifting, the adze heavy in your lap. You're imagining the islands these tools helped find, the stars guiding the way, and the birds confirming the path. Your eyes are heavy, the canoe's gentle rock pulling you towards sleep, and you're dreaming of carving your own paddle, one that might carry you across the sea. You're back in that double-hulled canoe, the Pacific's waves rocking you gently, but now you're surrounded by the rustle of dried taro and the faint cluck of chickens tucked in woven baskets. You're provisioning for a voyage, learning how Polynesians packed for months at sea, with no corner store in sight. The air's warm, heavy with the earthy scent of fermented breadfruit, and the canoe's hull creaks as you stack supplies. Mainstream history notes that Polynesian voyagers from 1000 BCE to 1300 CE mastered provisioning, carrying enough food and water to sustain entire families across thousands of miles. You're wrapping fish in ti leaves, your fingers sticky, and you're chuckling, imagining yourself botching the job and eating raw taro for weeks. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some crews brought live pigs, tethered to the canoe, who'd squeal like grumpy passengers during storms. Historians still argue whether this was practical or just a cultural flex to ensure fresh meat. You're eyeing a piglet now, hoping it doesn't mistake your foot for lunch. The crew's teaching you to balance the load, too much on one side, and you'll tip like a bad waiter. You're packing coconuts, their husks rough against your palms, and learning to store water in hollowed gourds. You're picturing a modern cooler, all ice and soda, and laughing. Good luck with that out here. The mainstream fact sinks in. These voyages carried not just food, but plants and animals to colonize new islands, like floating farms. You're impressed, but also stressed, wondering if you'd forget the taro and starve by day 3. The crew's joking now, saying your packing skills would leave everyone eating seaweed. You grin, sinking into the woven mat, the canoe's sway lulling you as you tie another bundle. The ocean's hum is steady, and you're noticing the careful order of the supplies, everything lashed tight for the journey. You're lying back now, the mat scratching your back, watching the crew check the gourds for leaks, the quirky piglets still squealing, and you're half tempted to bribe it with a coconut to shut up. You're picturing a Polynesian sailor rolling their eyes at your modern fussiness. Spilled Starbucks is not a crisis out here. The mainstream history's clear. Provisioning was an art, ensuring survival on voyages that could last months. You're trying to memorize the food list, taro, breadfruit, fish, but your mind's drifting, lulled by the sea's rhythm. Those stars, birds and tools from earlier sections, remember them? All rely on this prep work. Without it, you're not finding any islands. You're starting to respect the humble coconut, its water sloshing in the gourd beside you. The sun's dipping, casting a golden glow over the canoe, and you're sprawled out, the provisions' weight grounding you as the waves rock you gently. The crew's chatter softens, the air cooling as night creeps in. You're noticing the careful knots securing the baskets, each one a promise of survival. You're not a master provisioner, but you're learning, and the canoe feels like a lifeline now, packed with everything you'll need. The ocean's whispers blend with the piglet's grunts, and you're drifting, imagining the islands waiting beyond the horizon, their shores stocked by these very supplies. Your eyes are heavy, the canoe's rhythm slowing your breath, and you're dreaming of unwrapping a tie-leaf bundle, finding not just food, but the hope of a new home. You're still floating in that double-hulled canoe, the Pacific's endless swells lifting you gently, but now your attention snaps to the figure at the helm, a woman with sun-bronzed shoulders, her hands steady on the steering paddle, her gaze locked on the horizon like it's whispering secrets only she can hear. The realization washes over you. Polynesian wayfinding wasn't just a man's world, despite what those musty European explorers' journals might claim. The air hangs warm and heavy, tinged with salt, and the faint floral sweetness of pikaki blossoms braided into her hair, and the canoe's timbers creak in agreement as she adjusts course with the subtle shift of her weight. Mainstream history books love to prattle on about male navigators, but recent research, oral histories, charts, and even the voyaging renaissance of the 1970s confirms women like Hina, Pele, and the legendary Moikeha's sister Kapo'ulakinaana were not just passengers, but master wayfinders. Their knowledge of stars, currents, and winds passed down through generations like the most precious of heirlooms. You're struggling to keep up as she recites a star chant, her voice rhythmic as the waves, but your tongue stumbles over the vowels like a toddler learning to walk. Here's the quirky tidbit that'll stick with you. Some female navigators wore kappa skirts dyed with precise star patterns, the Pleiades and Orion's belt swirling around their hips like a celestial map. Historians still bicker over whether this was sacred symbolism, practical navigation aid, or just Polynesian haute couture. Why not all three? You're staring at her skirt now, the constellations fading slightly from years of salt spray, and you're absurdly tempted to ask if she commissioned it from some ancient, astronomically inclined tailor. The crew falls silent as she raises a calloused hand, pointing to a wispy cloud barely distinguishable from the haze. "Kahua," she murmurs. "Land cloud." You squint until your eyes water, seeing nothing but endless blue, but the way her shoulders relax tells you she's already charted a course in her mind. The mainstream fact lands like a wave to the chest. Polynesian women didn't just mend sails or tend to children below deck. They steered canoes wider than your apartment, calculated provisions for months-long voyages, and in places like Tahiti and the Marquesas, led entire fleets to settle islands as far-flung as Rapa Nui. You're equal parts awed and amused, picturing some lace-collared Victorian lady swooning at the thought of a woman commanding a vessel without so much as a parasol for propriety. The canoe rocks gently, and you're lulled by its rhythm, her chant weaving through the air like a lullaby. Keala o ka hoku, the path of the stars. Those frigate birds from Section 2, the star compass from Section 4, the myth of Maui hauling up islands. She knows them all with an intimacy that humbles you. You're sprawled on the mat now, the woven lauhala fibers scratching your elbows, and it dawns on you. She doesn't just cross the ocean, she converses with it, reading its moods like a lover's touch. Night deepens, the sky bleeding from sapphire to indigo, and you watch her tie a complex lashing knot one-handed while keeping the other on the paddle. The star-patterned skirt flutters in the breeze, and you're suddenly struck by the thought that this is the original power suit. No shoulder pads needed when you've got the Milky Way at your waist. The mainstream narrative unravels further. Polynesian gender roles were fluid long before the word inclusivity trended. Women could be kahuna, priests, ali'i, chiefs, or, like this navigator, po ho'okele, masters of the sea. You're straining to memorize her trick for reading cloud refraction, something about how light bends differently over land. But your brain's fogging over, drugged by the sea's metronome. The crew ribs you for nodding off, and you grin sheepishly, raising a half-hearted surrender. The ocean's hum sinks with her voice, and you're sinking deeper into the mat, the canoe's sway becoming your breath. You'll never be a navigator, not like her, but as sleep tugs at your eyelids, you dream of star-stitched skirts and horizons that bow to the women who dare to read them. The canoe rocks gently beneath you as the first golden fingers of dawn pry open the night sky, painting the horizon in streaks of molten apricot and the softest lavender. You rub the crust of sleep from your eyes, blinking as salt crystals catch the new light like tiny prisms. Then you see it, resting across the navigator's sun-browned knees like some sacred relic, though it's nothing you can touch. The Kapehu Wetu, the Polynesian star compass. Not brass or wood, but a living, breathing map etched into the very folds of her brain, dividing the endless horizon into 32 precise directional houses, each one named for the stars that rise and set in its sector. The morning air carries the crisp scent of dew evaporating from the canoe's wooden planks. And beneath it, is that the faintest earthy hint of land? Or just your desperate hope playing olfactory tricks after weeks at sea? Mainstream history books love to simplify it all down to they followed the stars. But what's unfolding before you is a symphony of natural navigation that would make modern GPS engineers weep. Each star house isn't just a point in the sky. It's a complete navigational package corresponding to specific swell patterns, seasonal winds, even the telltale flight paths of those frigate birds you learned about back in Section 2. Here's the detail that makes you grin despite your exhaustion. The most skilled navigators would actually lie prone in the canoe, eyes closed, reading the ocean's subtle movements through their skin and bones like human seismographs. Historians still bicker about whether this was strictly practical science or something bordering on the mystical. Maybe the ocean really did speak to them in vibrations and frequencies we've simply forgotten how to decode. The navigator, that same formidable woman who commanded your respect last night, extends a calloused finger, tracing an invisible line from the fading glow of Hokulea, what Europeans call Arcturus, toward what she names in a voice like tide-worn gravel, Ke ala Polohiwa a Kane, the black shining path of Kane. This celestial highway, she explains, leads unerringly to Tahiti's welcoming shores. You squint, trying desperately to follow her celestial logic, but your modern brain keeps short-circuiting, defaulting helplessly to GPS coordinates and Google Maps. The sheer sophistication of this system hits you like a rogue wave. This mental star compass allowed Polynesian navigators to pinpoint tiny island specks with an accuracy that left European explorers slack-jawed. Even Captain Cook, that paragon of Enlightenment-era navigation, recorded in his journals how Tahitian navigators could predict landfall within days after months at sea, a feat his brass instruments couldn't match. The image makes you chuckle, some powdered-wig British sailor squinting through a sextant while a sun-baked Polynesian teenager casually announces, "We'll raise Mataiva by Tuesday lunch, just watch." As the sun climbs higher, its heat pressing down like a warm hand, she begins teaching you to read the star compass by daylight. The sun's arc becomes your guide. The angle of swells your road signs. It's like learning a completely alien language where every ripple and wavelet carries meaning. Remember those peculiar cloud formations from Section 5. They're part of this lexicon too. Certain cumulus shapes cluster predictably, where distant land disrupts the wind patterns. Slowly, painfully, the interconnected web reveals itself. Birds signal direction, stars provide fixed bearings, swells whisper of distance travelled, and this remarkable woman at the helm synthesizes it all into a living, breathing map that no parchment could ever contain. The quirky historical footnote comes when she mentions that veteran navigators would chew our route before night watches, not just for its mild sedative properties, but because it supposedly sharpened night vision. Ancient Polynesian pharmacology meets modern blue light glasses, you muse. By midday, the tropical sun becomes a weight pressing down on your eyelids. The canoe's rhythmic sway, the creak of lashings, the hypnotic slap of waves against the hull. It all conspires to pull you back towards sleep. The navigator notices your nodding head, but says nothing, her own star compass still turning silently behind eyes that have seen more horizons than you've seen birthdays. As consciousness slips away, a profound realization dawns. This isn't just navigation. It's an ongoing conversation spanning generations. where ancestors speak through star paths, and the ocean answers with currents, where every swell carries the memory of 1,000 voyages. Your last coherent thought before sleep claims you is strangely comforting. Perhaps getting truly lost isn't about missing your coordinates, but forgetting how to listen to the world's ancient, whispering wisdom. The canoe's rhythmic sway lulls you into a half-dream state, when suddenly a shout jolts you awake. The crew is pointing excitedly at a dark smudge on the horizon. Land. Your heart leaps as the navigator calmly confirms what everyone already feels in their bones. The air changes subtly now, heavier with the scent of damp earth and vegetation, a welcome change from endless salt spray. Mainstream history focuses on the discovery of islands, but you're realizing the real magic was in the approach, how Polynesians could identify specific islands by the unique way waves refract around them. Here's the quirky detail. Some navigators claimed they could smell land before seeing it, detecting aromatic compounds released by certain plants miles out to sea. Historians still debate whether this was possible or just poetic exaggeration, but as your nose fills with the unmistakable perfume of pandanus and moist soil, you're inclined to believe. The island grows larger by the minute, revealing itself as a lush green jewel ringed by bone-white sand. The navigator begins chanting softly, a traditional arrival song that thanks the ocean for safe passage. You notice how her star-patterned skirt, remember that from section 9, sways in time with her movements, the constellations on the fabric seeming to dance. The mainstream fact strikes you. These weren't just random landfalls. Polynesians maintained detailed mental maps of hundreds of islands across millions of square miles of ocean, an accomplishment that makes your smartphone's navigation app look primitive. You're grinning now, imagining some ancient navigator being unimpressed by GPS. You need satellites to find your way. How quaint. As the canoe glides into the lagoon, the water shifts from deep blue to turquoise so bright it hurts your eyes. Fish dart beneath the hull, their scales flashing like scattered coins. The crew prepares to disembark, checking lashings and stowing gear with practiced efficiency. That piglet from section 8. It's wide awake now, squealing excitedly at the prospect of solid ground. The quirky historical note comes when the navigator explains that first landfalls were often accompanied by special rituals. Sailors would sometimes reverse their clothing or walk backward ashore to confuse any mischievous spirits that might have followed them across the sea. The canoe's hull grinds gently onto sand, and suddenly the voyage is over. You're struck by how ordinary this moment feels after such an extraordinary journey. Just people stepping onto a beach. Just another day in a centuries-old tradition of exploration. The navigator turns to you with a knowing smile. "Now you see," she says simply. And you do. The stars, the birds, the waves. They were never just tools. They were partners in a dance as old as the Pacific itself. As your feet touch solid ground at last, you realize you haven't just crossed an ocean. You've crossed into a new way of seeing the world. The warm golden sand shifts and settles beneath your bare feet as you take your first unsteady steps onto the island's shore. After weeks of constant motion aboard the canoe, solid ground feels foreign, yet miraculous. Your legs wobble like a newborn fawn's. Sea legs, they'd call this phenomenon back in your modern world, though no textbook could prepare you for this visceral disorientation. Around you, the crew moves with practiced efficiency, their muscular arms lifting bundles of precious taro shoots and breadfruit saplings from the canoe's hull with the care of parents cradling infants. The air vibrates with an orchestra of unfamiliar bird calls and insect songs, a raucous welcome after the ocean's endless blue silence that had been your world for so long. mainstream history books obsess over the voyages themselves, the daring crossings, the navigational feats, but you're now witnessing the true purpose behind these epic journeys. These Polynesian explorers weren't just discovering islands, they were performing the most ambitious ecological engineering project in human history. With each voyage, they transported entire ecosystems across thousands of miles of ocean. The quirky detail that makes you grin despite your exhaustion. They even brought geckos, not as pets, but as vital components of their ecological packages. The small lizards hid in the thatching of canoes, ready to establish new populations to control insects at settlement sites. Historians continue debating whether this was accidental stowaways or deliberate biological strategy, but as you watch a tiny gecko dart across your forearm, you're inclined to believe it was brilliant foresight. The navigator, the remarkable woman whose star-patterned skirt you first noticed back in Section 9, kneels gracefully and presses her weathered palms to the warm earth in solemn greeting. She explains in her low melodic voice that each new landfall followed strict, centuries-old protocols. The mainstream fact that shocks your modern sensibilities? Before establishing any permanent settlement, crews would often spend weeks or even months observing the island's rhythms, testing freshwater springs at different tides, sampling soil from various elevations, charting seasonal wind patterns. This wasn't reckless colonization. It was careful, sustainable expansion rooted in deep ecological wisdom. The contrast with European explorers, who frequently starved on their discovered lands despite their technological advantages, couldn't be more striking. As the crew fans out to scout the island's resources, you're tasked with helping build a temporary shelter. The thatching technique feels instantly familiar. It's the same intricate lashing pattern you practiced aboard the canoe back in Section 3. The knowledge transfers seamlessly from sea to land, a testament to how thoroughly Polynesian culture was adapted to their oceanic world. Your fingers, still sore from weeks of handling rough fibers, move with new confidence as you help weave palm fronds into a weatherproof roof. The physical work grounds you, helps quiet the lingering vertigo from your sea journey. When evening descends like a velvet curtain, the camp comes alive with the mouth-watering aromas of roasting fish and steaming taro in leaf wrappers. The firelight dances on faces that have become familiar through shared hardship and triumph. Then comes the quirky historical moment that etches itself into your memory. The navigator produces a small, beautifully carved stone bowl, an umeka, from her personal bundle. With ceremonial care, she mixes seawater with crushed kukwai nuts, creating a thick, fragrant paste. "The ocean gives us passage," she explains, as she begins applying the mixture to the canoe's hull with slow, reverent strokes. "We give her our care in return." This simple act of reciprocity strikes you as the true heart of Polynesian exploration. Not conquest, but conversation. Not domination, but an endless dance of giving and receiving. The fire crackles, sending sparks spiraling upward to meet the first stars peeking through the palm fronds. The waves continue their eternal whisper against the nearby shore, a lullaby you've come to know intimately. As you settle onto a bed of soft ferns, you realize this is the first time in weeks you'll sleep without the canoe's familiar rocking motion. The stillness feels strange, almost unsettling. In a quiet moment of self-awareness, you admit to yourself that you might actually miss the sea's constant embrace. The morning sun stretches golden fingers across the island as you awaken to a symphony of unfamiliar sounds. The raucous calls of tropical birds you can't name, the rustle of palm fronds in the dawn breeze, the distant murmur of waves caressing the reef. Your body protests as you rise from the fern bed, muscles stiff from yesterday's exertions after weeks of relative inactivity aboard the canoe. The salty tang of the ocean still lingers in your nostrils, but now it mingles with the rich, earthy perfume of damp soil and flowering plants. A fragrance so vibrant it seems to pulse with life itself. Mainstream history often portrays these landfalls as simple endpoints to daring voyages. But what unfolds before your eyes is a meticulously choreographed colonization ritual. The crew moves with purposeful efficiency, each member performing specialized tasks passed down through generations. Some carefully unwrap the precious breadfruit saplings transported in damp moss, while others test soil samples by rubbing earth between their fingers and tasting it. A practice that makes your modern hygiene sensibilities cringe until the navigator explains their assessing mineral content. Here's the quirky detail that fascinates you. They've brought specific types of volcanic rocks from their homeland to use as oven stones, ensuring they could prepare traditional meals even before identifying local suitable stones. Historians still debate whether this was practical necessity or profound cultural continuity. Perhaps both. The navigator approaches with a woven basket containing what looks like ordinary dirt. "Our most important cargo," she says with unexpected gravity. As you peer closer, you see the soil teems with tiny worms and microorganisms. A complete microbial ecosystem transported thousands of miles to help establish traditional crops in new soil. This revelation hits you like a wave. Polynesians didn't just bring plants and animals, they literally brought the very essence of their homeland's fertility. The mainstream implications are staggering. This was terraforming centuries before the concept existed in Western science. You're reminded of those geckos from yesterday, realizing the depth of ecological understanding required for such deliberate transplantation of life. As the day progresses, you're assigned to help establish the mare, the sacred ceremonial space that will serve as the spiritual heart of the new settlement. The work is backbreaking but profoundly meaningful. The navigator directs the placement of each stone with astronomical precision, aligning the structure with specific star paths that guided them here. Remember those star compass lessons from Section 10. They're being etched permanently into the landscape now. The stones themselves tell stories. Some brought as ballast in the canoe, others carefully selected from local volcanic rock, creating a literal bridge between old and new homelands. By afternoon, the tropical sun beats down mercilessly, and you retreat to the shade of newly erected palm thatch shelters. The quirky historical moment comes when the navigator produces a small wooden bowl containing a thick, pungent paste. "Mamaki tonic," she explains, daubing the herbal mixture on your sunburned shoulders. The relief is immediate, and you're struck by how medical knowledge travelled with these voyagers just as surely as their crops and tools. This wasn't just physical migration. It was the transfer of an entire cultural genome, with each element as vital as the next. As evening falls, the community gathers around the first earth oven, imu, they've built on this new land. The smells of roasting pork and steaming taro make your stomach growl. The navigator leads a chant that seems to weave together strands of gratitude, history, and hope, thanking the stars for guidance, the ocean for mercy, and this new land for its welcome. The firelight dances on faces that already look more at home here than you feel after a lifetime in your apartment. In this moment, you understand these people didn't just cross oceans. They carried entire worlds within their canoes, and now, with infinite care, they're planting those worlds in new soil. The realization settles over you like the tropical night, warm, alive with possibility, and humming with the echoes of countless similar nights across centuries of Polynesian history. The breaking dawn paints the lagoon in molten gold as you wade into waist-deep water with the fishing team. Your sleep-addled brain gradually sharpens to the morning's tasks. Today marks the settlement's first organized food-gathering expedition. The water, warmer than expected, swirls around your legs with each cautious step across the uneven coral bottom. Around you, experienced fishermen move with practiced ease, their calloused feet reading the reef like braille, while yours fumble against sharp edges. The navigator's star-patterned skirt, now faded from salt and sun, sways at the shoreline as she oversees preparations, her voice carrying across the water with surprising clarity. Mainstream anthropology often reduces ancient fishing to primitive spearwork, but what unfolds before you is an intricate ballet of ecological knowledge and precise teamwork. The fishermen employ a technique called hukilau, casting a massive net woven from olona fibers between teams of swimmers. Here's the detail that makes you pause mid-motion. The net's mesh varies intentionally, with smaller openings near the center to trap different fish sizes simultaneously. As you struggle with your section of netting, one fisherman laughs and adjusts your grip. "The ocean gives what we need, not just what we want," he chides good-naturedly. Historians still debate whether this selective fishing represented early conservation awareness or simply practical efficiency. But watching the team release undersized fish with care suggests the former. The morning's catch yields surprises beyond fish. Octopuses with color-shifting skin, sea cucumbers that contract at your touch, and most remarkably, a massive pakuikui, triggerfish, that the fishermen greet with particular reverence. The navigator explains this species' significance. Its distinctive patterns reportedly inspired traditional tattoo designs, and its ability to change color symbolized transformation in oral traditions. You run a finger along the fish's intricate markings, realizing how deeply marine life permeated Polynesian culture beyond mere sustenance. The quirky historical footnote comes when an elder produces a small bonefish hook, its unique curved design apparently perfected over generations to target specific species without bycatch, an ancient example of sustainable technology. As the sun climbs higher, transforming the lagoon into a shimmering turquoise platter, you're initiated into the art of loco EA, fish pond management. The mainstream archaeological record often overlooks these sophisticated aquacultural systems that allowed Polynesians to cultivate seafood like land crops. The team demonstrates how sluice gates in the rock walls regulate water flow based on tide cycles, while strategically placed algae attract certain species. Your modern mind reels at this 800-year-old precursor to modern aquaculture systems, complete with feeding schedules and selective breeding principles passed down through chance rather than textbooks. By afternoon, the entire community gathers to preserve the catch using methods unchanged for centuries. Women and men work side by side, some salting fish in woven palm leaf containers, others smoking fillets over fragrant kiawe wood fires. The navigator shows you how to wrap choice portions in tea leaves for fermentation, a delicacy called ika mata that will develop complex flavors over weeks. The process reminds you of Section 8's provisioning lessons, completing a circle from sea to preservation. A child giggles as you struggle with the leaf-folding technique, their small hands demonstrating the motion with generational ease that highlights how deeply these skills were ingrained from infancy. As dusk settles, stomachs full of the day's freshest catch, the community gathers around a new fire pit. The navigator produces a small drum made from shark skin stretched over a coconut log, its deep resonance vibrating in your chest. She begins a chant recounting the day's fishing, not as boastful tally, but as grateful acknowledgement of each species' gift. The stars emerge one by one, the same constellations that guided the canoe here, now witnessing this new chapter in their ancient relationship with these people. In the fire's flickering light, watching faces young and old united in song and full-bellied contentment, you realize these settlers didn't just transport plants and animals across the ocean. They carried an entire way of being, a philosophy of reciprocity with nature that modern conservation science is only beginning to rediscover. The waves continue their eternal whisper against the shore, a lullaby of continuity stretching back countless generations and perhaps forward into an uncertain future. The tropical downpour arrives without warning, fat warm droplets exploding against the broad banana leaves above your head as you scramble to reinforce the settlement's temporary shelters. After weeks of relentless sun on the open ocean, this sudden deluge feels like the sky itself has cracked open. The navigator stands unfazed at the water's edge, her face turned upward as rain streams down her weathered cheeks like tears of greeting. "The land drinks," she murmurs, and you realize this isn't just weather to these people. It's communion, the final piece of their ecological puzzle falling into place. Mainstream historical accounts often portray ancient settlements as primitive encampments. But what's emerging before your eyes is nothing short of a masterclass in environmental adaptation. The crew moves with urgent purpose, redirecting runoff into carefully dug trenches that feed the newly planted taro patches. Here's the detail that stops you mid-task. They're using palm fronds to create makeshift rain gauges, marking fluid levels on notched sticks to track precipitation patterns. One elder explains they'll compare these measurements to traditional lunar calendars to predict future rainfall, a centuries-old meteorological system that modern climate scientists are only beginning to appreciate. Historians still debate whether this represents proto-scientific observation or spiritual practice. But as you watch them adjust irrigation channels with mathematical precision, the distinction seems meaningless. The navigator beckons you to help secure the most precious cargo, the surviving breadfruit saplings transported thousands of miles in the canoe's belly. Their broad leaves tremble under the rain's onslaught as you lash protective screens of woven pandanus. The quirky historical moment comes when she produces small carved wooden amulets from her medicine bundle, tying them to each sapling with fibers from her own skirt. The ancestors watch over growing things, she explains, though whether this is spiritual protection or some forgotten horticultural technique is unclear. You notice the amulets are shaped like fish, perhaps invoking the marine nutrients that will nourish these plants. As the storm intensifies, transforming the camp into a labyrinth of mud and rushing streams, the community's true resilience emerges. Children laugh while sliding down makeshift mudslides, their joy undimmed by the deluge. Cooks improvise covered earth ovens, producing steaming bundles of taro and fish that taste all the richer for the adversity. You're handed a cup of hot liquid that turns out to be fermented coconut milk mixed with medicinal herbs. Storm tea, they call it, and its warmth spreads through your chest like sunlight. Remember those medicinal lessons from Section 12? They're being put to practical use now. By nightfall, the rain slackens to a gentle patter, and an extraordinary transformation becomes visible. The once dry stream beds now gurgle with fresh water. The taro patches have become shimmering ponds, and the entire landscape seems to sigh with relief. The navigator leads a solemn procession to the newly completed marae, where offerings of first fruits are made in gratitude for the rain's arrival. The ceremony's chants echo those you heard at sea, but now grounded in this specific place, this specific moment. As you stand there dripping, watching torchlight reflect off 100 rain-slicked surfaces, you realize these people didn't just survive the storm, they conversed with it, negotiated with it, ultimately welcomed it as an essential partner in their new beginning. The final revelation comes as you help rebuild a shelter damaged by the storm. The navigator shows you how to layer the thatch so rain cascades off in sheets rather than soaking through, the same technique used on the voyaging canoes. This architectural continuity from sea to land strikes you as profound. They weren't just moving between islands, they were extending one continuous way of life across the ocean's vastness. As you finally settle into dry clothes beneath a waterproof roof, listening to the rain's fading whispers on the thatch, you understand that true survival isn't about resisting nature's forces, but learning their rhythms well enough to dance with them. The storm hasn't just tested this new settlement, it has baptized it, binding people and placed together through shared resilience, just as countless storms have done for countless generations before. The first light of dawn reveals the transformed landscape, puddles mirroring the sky, streams swollen with last night's rain, and the air heavy with the petrichor of wet earth. You step outside, your bare feet sinking into mud now teeming with life. Tiny freshwater shrimp dart through newly formed ponds, and the once dry soil pulses with unseen activity. The navigator kneels at the water's edge, her fingers tracing the contours of a small channel she's directing toward the taro patches. "The land remembers," she says cryptically, and you realize she's not just diverting water, she's recreating the same irrigation patterns used in their homeland, as if whispering to the earth in a language it already understands. Mainstream archaeology often depicts early settlements as rough, temporary camps, but what's unfolding here is a meticulous reconstruction of an entire cultural landscape. Workers carefully transplant young kukui trees along the stream banks, not just for shade, but because their oily nuts will fuel lamps, and their roots will stabilize the soil. The attention to detail is staggering. Even the placement of cooking stones follows the same alignment as those back in their ancestral village. Here's the detail that lingers with you. They've brought cuttings of a particular vine, awikiwiki, not for food or tools, but because its delicate purple flowers will attract specific pollinators needed for their traditional crops. Historians still argue whether this represents advanced agroecology or something more symbolic, but as you watch a butterfly alight on one of the first blooms, the practical and spiritual blur into one. By mid-morning, the settlement hums with coordinated activity. A group of children, their laughter ringing through the palms, are tasked with collecting fallen branches, not for firewood, but to construct a Hail Noah, a communal house where taboo restrictions will be lifted during ceremonies. You're struck by how even the youngest members contribute, their small hands weaving thatch with surprising skill. The navigator notices your observation and smiles. "They've been practicing with seagrass since they could walk," she explains, and you recall the intricate lashings aboard the canoe. Knowledge isn't just taught here, it's breathed in, absorbed through generations of repetition. The afternoon brings a lesson in celestial agriculture. The navigator shows you how the newly planted breadfruit saplings are arranged not by size or species, but in alignment with specific stars, the same ones that guided the voyage here. When Hokulea rises there, she points to a spot just above the horizon. The fruit will be ready. It's a staggering concept. An orchard where harvest times are encoded in the night sky, linking celestial cycles to terrestrial abundance. The quirky historical moment comes when she buries a small carved stone at the base of each sapling, a practice modern ethnobotanists have recently theorized may enhance mycorrhizal networks, though the navigator simply calls it feeding the roots of memory. As evening falls, the community gathers for the first Aha Aina, a feast celebrating both the storm's gift of water and the successful transplantation of their crops. The earth oven yields steaming bundles of taro, fish wrapped in thai leaves, and the first fruits of their labour, small but symbolic. The navigator raises a cup of fresh coconut water in a toast that's also a chant, her voice weaving together thanks for safe passage, for rain, for the land's generosity. You notice how every element of the meal, the foods, the utensils, even the seating arrangements, mirrors feasts held in their homeland. This isn't just sustenance, it's cultural continuity served on a palm leaf platter. Lying awake later, listening to the symphony of unfamiliar night creatures, you realize something profound. These settlers haven't just moved across the ocean. They've brought an entire worldview with them, intact and functioning. The stars still guide them, the land responds to their care, and the rhythms of life continue unbroken. The storm didn't disrupt their plans. It revealed their resilience. As sleep finally claims you, the navigator's words echo in the dark. The land remembers. And now, so do you. The scent of wood smoke and fermenting fruit hangs heavy in the humid dawn air as you awaken to a transformed settlement. What began as temporary shelters have blossomed into an organized village overnight. The navigator's star-aligned breadfruit saplings now stand as proud sentinels along freshly cleared paths, their broad leaves glistening with morning dew. You stretch stiff muscles, still aching from yesterday's labor, and notice something peculiar. The entire camp is already awake and moving with quiet purpose. The navigator stands at the center of activity, her hands stained purple from crushing morning glory petals into dye for the ceremonial tapa cloth being stretched between two young breadfruit trees. Mainstream anthropology often portrays ancient settlements as existing in some mythical state of nature, but what unfolds before you is clearly a deliberate cultural replication. Workers are laying stones in precise spirals that mirror the waves of their homeland's sacred bays, while others carefully position carved wooden posts at astronomically significant points. Here's the detail that makes you pause mid-yawn. They're using lengths of braided coconut fiber to measure out proportions identical to their ancestral village's layout, maintaining cosmological relationships between structures that modern architects would need CAD software to replicate. Historians still argue whether this represents spiritual necessity or brilliant psychological anchoring in a new environment. But watching an elder adjust a post by finger widths while consulting the rising sun, the distinction seems academic. The morning's task takes you to the newly cleared Maloloai taro fields, where the navigator demonstrates how to talk to the young plants. This isn't metaphorical. She literally hums specific melodic patterns while working, explaining that certain vibrations encourage stronger root growth. The quirky historical moment comes when she produces a small gourd instrument that emits frequencies matching the nesting calls of mud-dwelling frogs back home, a sonic lure to establish necessary ecological relationships. Your modern mind reels at this sophisticated understanding of bioacoustics centuries before the field existed. As you awkwardly attempt to mimic her humming, a nearby worker laughs and corrects your pitch. Apparently, even plants are music critics here. By midday, the settlement's transformation becomes even more striking. What was yesterday a simple rain shelter has evolved into an impressive longhouse, its rafters lashed with intricate knotwork depicting the Voyagers' star path. Children play a hopping game that traces the same constellations in the dirt, their laughter punctuating the serious work of adults. You're handed a bowl of pungent fermented mash, that turns out to be the first batch of local awa. Its earthy bitterness a far cry from the store-bought kava you once tried back home. The navigator watches your reaction with amusement. The land's voice tastes different here, she observes, but the song remains the same. As afternoon shadows lengthen, the community gathers for the most unexpected ceremony yet. The navigator produces a small wooden bowl containing soil from their homeland, carried all this way in a sealed gourd. With solemn care, she mixes it with earth from the new taro patch, physically joining old and new in a ritual that's equal parts poetry and agronomy. The mainstream implications are profound. This isn't just symbolic gesture, but deliberate microbial inoculation, blending essential soil biomes across oceanic distances. Modern science is only beginning to understand such ecological wisdom, yet here it's practiced with the casual certainty of tradition. Night falls with a chorus of unfamiliar insects as the first ceremonial tapa is completed. Its patterns telling the story of both the voyage and this first week ashore. The navigator drapes it over the longhouse entrance, where torchlight makes the designs seem to move like waves. As you drift towards sleep, stomach full of the first true harvest meal and ears ringing with new chants, you realize these people haven't just survived their transplant. They've grafted their entire culture onto this new land with the precision of master gardeners tending the most precious of saplings. The stars above are the same ones that guided them here, but their light now falls on something both ancient and brand new, a living bridge across time and tide. The piercing cry of a seabird you don't recognize jolts you awake before dawn. A thin mist clings to the ground as you emerge from the longhouse, your breath visible in the uncharacteristically cool air. The entire village is already stirring, but there's a different energy today, an electric undercurrent of anticipation. The navigator stands at the water's edge, her silhouette motionless against the pearlescent pre-dawn light. As you approach, you notice her hands are trembling slightly, the first crack you've seen in her usual composure. The currents whisper change, she murmurs without turning, and you suddenly understand. Today is the day the second wave of canoes might arrive from the homeland. Mainstream history often portrays Polynesian migrations as single heroic voyages, but the reality unfolding before you is far more nuanced. The settlement you've helped build is just the vanguard, an advance party preparing for the main group's arrival. Workers are now putting finishing touches on structures that seemed unnecessarily large days ago, while others stockpile food with renewed urgency. Here's the detail that makes your pulse quicken. Young runners have been stationed at the island's highest points since midnight, their eyes trained on the horizon with signal fires ready to light. The navigator checks and rechecks the alignment of shore markers, stones placed to guide incoming canoes through the reef. Historians still debate whether these staggered migrations were planned or necessitated by canoe capacity, but watching the meticulous preparations, you're convinced every detail was calculated generations in advance. As the sun climbs, the village transforms into a living clockwork of activity. Women polish the last of the ceremonial bowls, while men practice a welcoming haka, their footwork raising puffs of dust. You are assigned to help prepare the Heil Mua, the sacred men's house where arriving navigators will be debriefed. The quirky historical moment comes when the navigator produces a small bundle containing fragments of wood from the homeland's most sacred temple, to be incorporated into this new structure, creating spiritual continuity across thousands of miles of ocean. The care with which these charred splinters are handled suggests they're more precious than any gemstone. Noon passes without sight of sails, but the tension only grows. The navigator begins quietly chanting what you recognize as the same star paths from your voyage, but now inverted, as if pulling the expected canoes toward her voice. Children play a game that involves reenacting the first landing, their laughter belying the adults' nervous energy. You notice subtle signs of stress everywhere. A cook oversalting the imu pork, a craftsman snapping a lashing cord with uncharacteristic clumsiness. The mainstream reality sinks in. This isn't just about reunion. If the second wave doesn't arrive, the settlement's genetic diversity and specialized knowledge may be insufficient for long-term survival. As afternoon wanes, you find yourself staring at the horizon until your eyes water. Then, a shout from the cliffs. A runner comes barreling down the path, his message tumbling out between gasps. Sails spotted to the northwest. The village erupts in controlled chaos. Final food preparations, last-minute straightening of ceremonial garments, a flurry of children being scrubbed clean in the lagoon. The navigator's hands are steady now as she lights the first of the signal fires, its smoke curling into specific patterns you realize are a coded message. Remember those cloud reading lessons from Section 5? They're being actively used now as she studies the approaching weather. Dusk settles like a held breath as the first canoe glides through the reef passage, then another, and another. You count 7 vessels in total, their sails emblazoned with familiar clan symbols. The air vibrates with the sound of conch shells and rhythmic weeping as loved ones recognize each other across the water. The quirky historical detail comes when you notice each arriving canoe is trailing a long braid of seaweed, a traditional way to signal they've brought new marine species to transplant in local waters. Even in this moment of reunion, the work of ecological building continues. The night that follows defies description. The feast tables groan with food. The chants rise and fall like tides, and the stars themselves seem to shine brighter in witness. The navigator moves through it all with quiet satisfaction, occasionally touching the star patterns on her now faded skirt. As you drift towards sleep near dawn, stomach full and heart fuller, you realize what you've witnessed isn't just the end of a voyage. It's the beginning of something meant to last centuries. The settlement is no longer an outpost. Tonight it became a true daughter of the homeland, with all the responsibilities and promises that entails. The ocean that brought them here will.